It's time to turn the page on last week's last-second loss to Oklahoma. West Virginia hosts Texas Tech this weekend as the Mountaineers look to right the ship. We're talking with Chris Level, the publisher of Red Raider Sports on the Rivals Network, for the ins and outs on Texas Tech. Chris, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. How about you, Jared?
Doing all right. Can't complain. It's a beautiful night in Morgantown as we record this. Looking forward to a good game this weekend. So I guess just kind of to start off, I think Keenan and I are both wondering, after last week's 70-35 loss to Texas, even just not even after that, but looking at that game, what went wrong for the Red Raiders?
Everything. Yeah, I mean, I do the sideline for the radio broadcast, and I'm there on the sideline, and I think there's some pressure on Matt Wells. There's no doubt about that coming into the season. I think they had played well for the most part in the first three non-conference games. I think that Houston team they beat is pretty good. They have not lost since Texas Tech beat them. I think they had a scare against SFA. A guy that coaches SFA is from nearby in Lubbock, and that was a lot closer than I know the fans were wanting it to be. And then you blow out FIU's coached by Butch Davis, and then you had Texas dead to rights in Lubbock last year. You're up 15 points with 3 minutes to go, and you just blew it. Like everything had to go right for Texas. And so I think there was some motivation, and at least we thought. I think this is it's an older Texas Tech team. There's a lot of transfers on this thing. They have a lot of super seniors, and you go into that game in Austin, and it's kind of like, you're an underdog and everything, but I thought you'd give them a game. And I think you thought your defense had been much better. And I was, I do a show here in Lubbock every day, and I think one of the questions we'd asked about aloud was, this is either a really good time to be playing Texas or a really bad time to be playing Texas, and we're not sure which one it is. But I think we probably know now it was not the best time to be playing them, as they've figured out what their quarterback situation is and their identity, but they just ran over you, and they a lot of play action. Bijan Robinson is one of the best backs in the Big 12, and certainly in the country. And it just didn't go well. I think they had you scrambling, and Sarkisian he's an elite play caller, and I think he's just still trying to figure out what he's got. But he had your head spinning a little bit with a lot of motion and a lot of just a lot of things, and it just did not go well, and it snowballed on you. And I think, let's be honest, Texas could have scored more if they'd have wanted to. They could have gotten into the 80s, unfortunately, but that's the reality of. And so this team has now heard about how terrible they are, and it's a week-to-week sport, and so it's hard to look at that game and feel like you have much of a chance in any game you'll play the rest of the way if you play that way. But we see these crazy things happen in a week to week. But yeah, that's a long answer to tell you that everything went wrong. I mean, your quarterback got hurt. I mean, so I could keep going on and on. It was it was a mess. And I know from being around the facility today, they want to flush it and move on. And, they feel like they've got, 2 months left of football. So they want to make the most of that. But it was they got a wake up call very early on in the conference season for sure.
Keenan here, Chris. Is there concern? Is this a harbinger of things to come, or was it just a one-off? Obviously teams have bad games sometimes. Are there concerns that arise from this, or was it you just think a bad day at the office?
Yeah, I think it's probably similar to how I'm guessing you guys were wondering the same thing after that Maryland game, and wondering, is this what this team is? And I think you've seen them, respond and kind of, get some signature wins and play Oklahoma close. And so there's absolutely concern. There's no question. Around here it's doom and gloom, and everybody's frustrated and angry, and from a fan base standpoint. And yet, you go over there, and the players that they've tried to move on, they've tried to flush it. They're like, that wasn't us. That wasn't. So, they'll decide that, on what it really was. I think that the part that I had a hard time with is that And this is what's scary about Texas is that they played harder than Texas Tech did. They played harder. They were doing all the things that a team like Texas Tech needs to be doing when you don't have as much talent and all those things. And I thought, against Houston in the first game of the season, Texas Tech played harder than Houston. And that's what this team's not good enough to just roll out and out talent most of the teams in the league. And so I think that they've got to play harder. It's like the 9th year in a row. I'm not exaggerating here. I went and looked it up. I think there's been 1 year slipped in there, but it's been the 9th year in a row where this program is going to have multiple starts missed by their starting quarterback. So it's like the same movie over and over again. You just can't get any traction. Even Pat Mahomes missed some time when he was here due to injury. And so it's just that part is frustrating, is that, you wanted to see what a season under Tyler Shuck would look like, but you're not going to get that chance. But it's Henry Colombi's show, at least for the next month and a half.
How is Matt Wells approaching this week? Obviously you never want to have a 70-35 loss, but you really need to come out of that and show that, hey, that was just a one-off. That was a fluke. Obviously he talked with you guys today. What was his message? What's he kind of looking for out of his team this week?
Yeah, and I host his coach's show every Wednesday, so I'll sit with him tomorrow night for an hour, and that's one of the things I was curious about, like today and tomorrow night and all those things. I'm not sure when you're airing this. Hopefully I didn't date it. Sorry about that. If I did, that's a screw up on my part. But
all good.
Okay. Because at this point you're like part psychologist. You can only, like part of me was like, you got to get in everybody's face and chew them out and demand more and just spit nails. But with 2 months left in the season, you gotta keep them engaged. You gotta lean on your seniors. You've got to. So I think it's probably a little bit of both. But he was very positive today. I talked to Colin Schooler today, and and I think he's one of the best players on this team. And that's what he said. He's like, we'll decide how this thing's going to go. Like, and he's talking about we as in the seniors on this team, so I don't know what you'll get Saturday. I could see, I was partly surprised. We get caught up in the moment, and you get caught up into what you last saw. I mean, you're only as good as your last game, or what you put on tape, is what coaches say. I was surprised the spread, according to the folks in Vegas, was only 7 points. I didn't know what to think, because you look at it and you're like, man, are you just going to get worked in every game you play? And that obviously that won't be the case, but I don't know what kind of effort you'll get. But I mean, I know that that's what they're talking about around there today, is just in this week, is just playing hard and like getting back to what they talked about all off season and trying to get some traction. And so, but now you got to do it with Henry under center, and you're mostly healthy on defense, but and they know that, tackling Letty Brown, and they know they've had success against West Virginia the last 2 years. I'm sure that, I know Neil very well, and and Neil, I mean, I saw his press conference today too, and he's like, Texas Tech's had our number, so I'm sure that's not sitting well with him at all, and understandably so. But I'm just fascinated about this league, because I don't know if we really know what we're going to get week in and week out. But that absolutely goes with what the Red Raiders will show this coming Saturday. I'm not real sure. I would have thought they would have played Texas much better. They did not. So I guess, it's show and tell on Saturday for sure.
Chris, how does the offense change with Henry in there? Does it at all? I know West Virginia fans are obviously familiar with him last year. He led the Red Raiders to a win over them. Does it change with him at all?
Yeah, it's a different coordinator this year. And I think that, Sonny Cumbie, obviously, and Sonny and Neil work together here under Tuberville. And that's how I know Neil so well, from his time here. And so Sonny's, he runs the offense much differently than I think David Yost did, which was last year. But to answer your question, it won't change a lot. No, he's going to move the pocket. He's going to get the quarterback involved in the run game. I think they don't, last year it was in the last 2 years under David Yost, they ran 11 personnel basically 90 to 95% of the time, and they would try to play as fast as they possibly could. That was just their MO and their identity. And I think at some level it was easier to defend for some teams than others. But I think Sonny wants to establish the run game. At TCU last year, they averaged 220 yards a game on the ground. I definitely think that they want to establish the run game, probably more so than what David did. And he wants to set that up to take deep shots down the field. And they did. That was one of the bright spots last week, is that Henry played well in a game where, you were kind of behind, 49-14 at halftime. You were behind, but he started chunking it down the field, and they had caught Texas in a lot of man-to-man coverage, and there was 3, deep shots, and he connected on all of them. And I think everybody came away going, Henry looks a lot better than he did last year. And so, but that's, so to answer your question, Sonny they won't change the offense a lot. It'll be, you'll see the tight end involved. You'll see 4 wide some. You'll see 2 back sets some. It's kind of a little bit of everything. And he'll get Colombi moving and get him involved in the run game some.
Now, you did mention the quarterback injuries being an issue for the Red Raiders for a while. Obviously, Colombi's experience is something that not many backup quarterbacks have. Is calling him a backup, would you even consider that accurate? I mean, he's second on the depth chart, but like I said, he's not the typical backup model that you see around the country.
Yeah, no, he as he would tell you, he's been here before. He backed up Jordan Love, who's playing for the Packers now at Utah State. Jordan got hurt, and Henry was able to come in and start some games. Obviously, Henry started a handful of games for this team last year and won some games. And the thing about like the quarterback competition, if there was one, when Tyler Shuck transferred here in the spring, is that Henry, he never had a day off or a bad day. And he's just really consistent. Now, he does not have the upside as somebody like Shuck does, like big picture, if that makes sense. And then sometimes it doesn't look real sexy. Okay. That it just doesn't, like, he can't make the wild plays and some of those things, but he's clearly experienced. And I think that's what we talked about around here, is like he was the ideal backup because he's got plenty of experience, and he was not going to be somebody you worried about that was going to get mad if he didn't win the job and transfer out and all that stuff, because he's a senior, so yeah, he's a unique, backup from the standpoint of that he was the backup quarterback to start the season and last season. But yeah, he started plenty of Big 12 games, and it won't be too big for him and all those things. It's just a matter of, can he make plays and be consistent or not?
Who are the skill guys to watch, Chris, when they have the ball? Obviously, they've had good running backs the last couple of years, always have a deep receiver group. Who are the guys that West Virginia fans need to be aware of?
Yeah, Sir Roderick Thompson missed the first 2 games of the season. He's a guy that I know West Virginia fans would be familiar with. And I don't know if he's your best running back. He's probably your most experienced, but he's kind of working his way back in. And I talked to him today as well. And, he's kind of trying to get into a rhythm and everything. He'll get the bulk of the carries at tailback today or this weekend. And, Kalen Geiger transferred in. He's a wideout that came from Troy. He's a, twitchy, outside receiver kid doesn't have a ton of size, but he's really fast. And Eric Izukama is, one of the best wideouts in the Big 12. I mean, he was preseason, first team All Big 12, and he's a handful. I would tell you he's probably questionable at this point. He had some issues last weekend, so I think he'll play, but can't say for sure. But that, and then they've got a couple of tight ends that they like. Travis Kuntz is one of the super seniors that came back. He didn't do a whole lot last weekend, but he had 2 touchdowns, versus Houston early on in the season. And they've got a bunch of young wideouts that are in the 6'3", 6'4" range that they just haven't established themselves yet as to being playmakers yet. But their time is coming. Loic Fungi was one of those. He caught a long 50-yard touchdown pass against Texas last week. So that gives you a few names to concentrate on. But So and it's been fascinating for us because they kind of feature somebody a little bit different every week on kind of what they want to go to. And so, but that gives you a good idea of the skill.
Chris, obviously, they had played pretty good defense up until the Texas game. What can you take away, if anything, from that game and really moving forward? And where have they made improvements? You know, Neil talked about that today. They played pretty deep.
Yeah, I think they had really done well against the run, and then they didn't. I think that they were averaging, only allowing about 40 or 50 yards a game up until last week when they just got run over. And so I think that was the strangest part for us that are around this group a lot, is that you thought that was the matchup you thought you would compete in. You've got a really deep and senior laden group of linebackers. Your defensive line is not, great. It's just average, but I think you make up for it with a lot of depth and quality at linebacker. But I think they got caught with a lot of tempo on Saturday. And I think, if anything, Keith Patterson, who has spent some time at West Virginia, I think was there under Dana, but he will likely simplify what they're trying to do now a bit, because I think they were trying to do a lot schematically and with some different personnel groups and subbing quite a bit. But I think he may simplify a bit because, Sarkisian just, exposed a lot of what they were trying to do and started going fast, and it just didn't look like Texas Tech was ready for it.
Who is a guy on Texas Tech's defense that, through 4 games this season, you're kind of just waiting for him to, maybe return to form, or a guy that is capable of more than he's putting out so far?
Yeah, I mean, the two best players on that side of the ball are Rico Jeffers and Colin Schooler. Those are two guys that are at linebacker. To answer that question, I guess, I don't know, DeMarcus Fields maybe. I mean, he plays some DB. He's a safety, corner, nickel guy, very experienced. Another one of the super seniors. He's had some moments this season where he's looked pretty good, but I think he's a guy that I would think that has got a chance to be, get a call from the NFL and have a chance to try to make a team via undrafted free agent type, just to give you an idea of kind of what NFL folks think about him. And he's somebody that wears number 23, that he's a matured, versatile player that, I think he's made a few plays, but I think we were expecting him to be a little bit more consistent. Probably being harsh there on him, but make no mistake. I mean, Colin and Rico are the two best players on that side of the ball. I think Reggie Pearson is an interesting guy too. He's a guy that transferred in from Wisconsin and played and started for the Badgers in their secondary 2 years ago. And then last year didn't play, some different reasons why. From health standpoint, Wisconsin wouldn't clear him. He came in and played really well to start. And he hasn't followed up with much in the last couple of weeks. And so he obviously needs to step up and play better.
What are your keys to this game? What are you looking out for? What needs to happen in your eyes?
Texas Tech must stop the run or slow it down, and obviously their entire focus will be, on Letty Brown, and understandably so. Again, easier said than done. And then I think that you just have to, and you've got to establish the run game. They just were not able to do that versus Texas last week, and you got behind and you had to abandon it. But I think that's where it kind of starts. And I think ultimately what I'm saying to you is that you've got to be better on the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. And they weren't last weekend, and they were the first 3 weeks. And so obviously the competition, elevated quite a bit, and you caught Texas at a bad time. I think their offensive line dominated that game. And you've got to respond with your front seven on the defensive side of the ball this week, because if Letty Brown is able to run for 150, 200 yards. I mean, we could talk about all kinds of other stuff, but the odds are Texas Tech won't fare well in that kind of situation. And it's fascinating to me too. This league has changed so much in that there's just not, the games are, you get limited possessions. I mean, everybody's kind of running the ball now, and there's not the shootouts that you get into anymore. Everybody's leaning on defense and trying to run the ball, and there's a lot of good running backs in this league. And then you just need to be the team that can stop the run, because then that limits the shots downfield that get taken with the play action stuff. And so really only Oklahoma and Oklahoma State are really the only teams that are going to kind of get into shootouts and, like, I think want to throw the ball a lot and major in it. Everybody else wants to, sit on the ball a little bit, run it, and play good defense and give themselves a chance. So I would expect a lot of that on Saturday from both teams.
How do you see it playing out? You've obviously know this Texas Tech game. What's your prediction for this one?
I don't. I wish I could. I don't. I'm not sure if you'll see 38-20 West Virginia, or if you'll see something like 27-24 Texas Tech. I could see all in between. I'm not real sure what you'll get out of this Red Raider group. I really don't. And that's kind of frustrating, to be honest. I mean, I think that's where the fans are coming at from, is you're just not real sure, who are these guys, kind of thing. I think they'll play harder. I think they'll play better. Is that going to be good enough? I think if you're Texas Tech, you try to, and I, it's funny because I know Jarrett Dagy's, his mom teaches my daughter in English. Okay. She's, here at Cooper High School, which I just left about 10 minutes ago from watching a middle school game. So he went to the same high school that my kids go to. It's just fascinating. All the Neil Brown and the Dagy, all the connections that I've got with this West Virginia program. But, I think, and you guys understand this, but Jared he's had his moments where he's played well, and he's had his moments where, you want to give the other kid a chance. But I think if you're Texas Tech, you want to put the game in his hands and say, we're not going to let Letty Brown beat us. Let's see if Jared can. And, I don't know if you're good enough to do that or not, but that would be the game plan. But I would expect, I heard you guys talking about 27-21 or similar score to Virginia Tech game. I bet you get something like that. But I don't know if Texas Tech will have enough to win it or not. No.
For more on Texas Tech, you can follow Chris on Twitter at Chris Level, or check out WVSports.com. Again, Chris, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks, fellas. Appreciate you having me. Enjoy the game Saturday.
West Virginia is 2-2 heading into this week's clash against Texas Tech. Last week's game against Oklahoma, it probably should have been a win for the Mountaineers. They played uncharacteristically well against the number 4 team in the country. Keenan, what were your takeaways from that one? There, a lot of bright spots, the defense being one. How did you see it play out? What did you take away from that one?
I thought West Virginia played to win. I mean, I do. When you look at how that game unfolded, we talked about this last week, Jared. Oklahoma had struggled on offense, and I've been a firm believer. In the West Virginia's defense is a lot better than people think it is, camp, and I have been since fall camp. And am I surprised that West Virginia held them to 16 points? Absolutely. I think that would be a shock to say otherwise, but am I surprised that West Virginia fared well defensively? No. I think, looking at that, when I watched that game live, I made a post about this on the Blue Lot too. I kind of thought, what's West Virginia doing offensively, especially in the second half? But really, when you go back and look at it, they really gave themselves a chance. I thought the coaches put together a really good plan and gave them a chance to win that football game by shortening it and really trying to put them in a position to win. Obviously, devising a plan and executing that plan are two very different concepts. And, West Virginia faltered in some key spots, namely a false start penalty, a missed throw to a wide open Bryce Ford Wheaton in the back of the end zone. I mean, he still should have called it. He got his hands on it, but it'd be unfair to say it was not a misfire. Obviously a bad snap You look at that, and that changes the entire complexion of this game. And West Virginia had a legitimate chance, a great chance to win this football game, and they faltered in some key areas. And really, when you look at this West Virginia team, that's kind of the story so far this season. The difference between a good team and a bad team is finding a way to win, even when you make mistakes. And West Virginia is still trying to figure out how to be a good football team.
Yeah, we definitely saw on Saturday that they have made a lot of progress. I mean, if you I guess just the only way really that I can put it was this just seems like a completely different team than we saw go out on the field to take on Maryland. And it really does start with the defense. You think after last season when, you lose Tyke Smith, Darius Stills, Tony Fields, Drayshawn Miller. You'd expect by losing them, that would be a tremendous step back for this West Virginia defense. If they can, obviously they had the struggles, first couple weeks of the season, but if they can keep playing the way that they did on Saturday against the Sooners, it's almost like the losses of those guys are moot. Like there's, it's next man up mentality, especially in that secondary. We've seen big, big impacts from guys like Jackie Matthews, the game-saving pass deflection on the Virginia Tech game. Daryl Porter as well with the big tip against Oklahoma. Keenan, on that defensive side of the ball, who has impressed you the most throughout these 4 weeks? You got a lot of candidates. Those two guys, Lance Dixon has put in some quality minutes. Who in your eyes has exceeded expectations?
I think the defensive line as a whole, I thought that it would be a strength coming into this year. I did not know it would be this big of a strength. Depth is the one concern. I will concede that, but I do think that just looking at it top to bottom, Akeem Mesidor is playing a different level of football right now. I know you're not going to look at his stats and be wowed, but you're not really going to be wowed by nose guard stats very often. He's dominating. I mean, most times that West Virginia is generating pressure or keeping guys in the pocket, it's him getting pressure up the middle, commanding double teams. He's doing his job. Dante Stills played probably, arguably, he's played some good games in the past. So I don't want to, be a prisoner of the moment here, but played very, very well against Oklahoma. And Taj Austin has been great at the 5 tech. He's really been impressive, and I think they've gotten some quality snaps out of Jordan Jefferson and Sean Martin, but you need to find some more. Whether that's Darrell Middleton, some of those other guys on the roster, but I think top to bottom, that group's been impressive. It's very, very, very rare you lose a consensus All-American in Darius Stills, and the unit somehow gets better up front. And I think that really is what's happened. Through 4 games. Will it withhold? Will it withstand? Probably. But I mean, we'll see how it turns out. But I do think that I've been very impressed with that unit. On the flip side of that, I think linebacker play has got to be better. It's been up and down this season, I think. Watching them play, I think coverage is not necessarily their strong suit, but I think West Virginia's got to get better there, and they've got to get more deep there because they're not really trusting a lot of guys to play.
Yeah, important to note, Josh Chandler Samito has, he is no Tony Fields. That's an incredibly hard player to replace, but Josh Chandler Samito has put in quality minutes for the Mountaineers this season, consistently at the top of the box scores in terms of tackles. He had 12, led the team against Oklahoma. Something I wanted to bring up, though, was Alonzo Adai. Kind of been, I don't know if flaky is the right word, but he's been noticeably absent from, tallying tackles and making these key plays for the Mountaineers the past couple of games. He had 9 tackles against Oklahoma. That's huge. We saw, last season what he was able to do. He was consistently, arguably, I don't think anybody would disagree that he was one of the leaders of that defense, or at the very least, he was the leader in the secondary. Him he is even more valuable this season based on how much youth that there is there in that secondary. Uh, so it's nice to see him putting in a good game. X-ray low again, 6 tackles. In all, this defense is becoming fairly well rounded, and God, it's such a pleasure to watch. But switching gears a little bit now to offense, uh,
Not a pleasure to watch.
yeah, yeah, it depends on who you ask. I know probably most of our blue lot people will say that it's a pleasure to watch Garrett Green. What are your thoughts on how this 2 quarterback system is shaking out so far?
I like the rhythm with it so far. I think it's clear that West Virginia, for whatever reason, whether they don't believe he's ready, whether they think that Daggy gives him, some different elements, doesn't fully trust Garrett Green, to give him the full keys yet. But I liked what they did with him. I would have preferred at time. I'm not a play caller, but I would have preferred times had maybe they kick started that thing a little bit earlier. They waited till they got around the 50 to kickstart it most time and get him in there. Clearly when he's in the game, yeah, it's going to open up things more in the run game for Letty Brown. I don't think you take the small sample size of the past 2 games, because if you want to do that, I mean, they had an 80-yard run with Daggy in the game against Virginia Tech. So they had a 20-yard run in this game. It was the only run they had over 10 plus yards. But what he did do is freeze those linebackers a little bit, made it a little more difficult, and they got him on the edge, even let him throw the ball some. I think the 2 quarterback thing can work for West Virginia. I really do. I think they can continue to build on it and use it effectively as they continue to progress this offense. I think that where it's at now is not going to be where it's at a couple weeks from now. And we talked about this last week. I expected them to start throwing out of it. They did. It wasn't anything too complex, kept it really simple for him. But just having that element when he's in the game is a completely different thing. And really, for the most part, Daggy made a couple bad throws in this game. The offense stalled at times, but I thought he also made some crucial throws as too. Moved the chains. If people get caught up on stuff sometimes, it wasn't the most difficult throws, but it didn't need to be. He took what was there. He moved the chains. Both of them kind of worked in unison. I think that this offense can be successful, but they're not to the point right now where they can overcome mistakes. When they're knocked off schedule and behind the sticks, it's really tough for this group right now, especially when going against a team like Oklahoma, who was able to heat them up and protection was an issue. They've got to stay on track. They got to stay on schedule. If they do, I think this team can score points. If they don't, we're going to continue to see these 3-point second half, which has a lot of people mad on the blue line right now.
Honestly, it's got me mad too, just because from our point of view, what do we write about? I think at least my point of view, I'd rather take a 62-60 game over a 16-13 game. But uh, speaking of the West Virginia offense, I did want to touch on Bryce Ford Wheaton, kind of what he put forth against Oklahoma. 8 receptions, 93 yards. Again, he's kind of like Sam James against Virginia Tech, where uh, here's a guy who gets a lot of crap for whatever reason, and put in a really good game. He's the leading receiver. Uh, it's still that the wide receiver room seems like it's always a work in progress, because you've really just got a group of guys and there is no number one guy. But that was nice to see Bryce Ford Wheaton put up those numbers. And again, Sam James, 5 receptions, 21 yards, didn't hurt the team. Keenan, what are your thoughts on Bryce Ford Wheaton's progression and really just that wide receiver room?
I like where they're going. I mean, overall, I think it's a different guy every week right now, which really, when you have a room that's, supposedly deep, like it's been built with a lot of different guys, you'd like to see that. Bryce took advantage of his opportunities. He a lot of the same routes, a lot of that like little slant action underneath, taking him underneath, going in the middle of the field. You want a big body moving up the field like that. Makes it tough to tackle. He's got to break a couple of those moving forward. And you really got to catch that one that went through his hands. But overall, it was a solid game. I think offensively, West Virginia's got to figure out how to run the ball better a little bit, figure out how to use both their quarterbacks more in unison. And, I think things will start to come together. I don't think that this 16-13 game is necessarily a reflection of the offense. They've had a lot of splash plays. It isn't as much as you'd like to see. through the first three, but they've had splash plays. I think they purposely shortened the game to try to keep Oklahoma off the field. It almost worked. So encouraging. But moving on, West Virginia's got another game this weekend, a home game, Jared.
Yeah, home game. Looking forward to it. I know you and I are glad to be back out there at the stadium. You did mention, offense kind of needs to figure some things out. What better opportunity than to try and figure those out against a team that allowed 70 points scored against their defense last week? Texas Tech. I'm sure everybody listening has seen 70-35 loss to the Texas Longhorns. Not great. Not great at all for the Red Raiders, but West Virginia could benefit. Keenan, heading into this week, what are you looking at? What's the main thing that you got your eyes on?
Can West Virginia take care of this team? 2 years in a row, it's been golden opportunities for West Virginia. And Texas Tech has really kind of just hit them off the top rope. The game in Morgantown 2 years ago was a joke. I mean, it was over early. West Virginia, that's one of two games in Neil Brown's tenure where West Virginia just didn't show up. The other one was Iowa State last year, but didn't show up last year. They had every opportunity to win that game in Lubbock and literally gave the game away on a fumble return for a touchdown. So can West Virginia get it done? They've not played very well against Texas Tech, and no disrespect to their program at all, but it's not as if they've been overachieving of late. West Virginia had started to kind of seize control of that series, and really they've completely stole the momentum back, and that's taken care of West Virginia. Can they bounce back? I think they can. Obviously, I think West Virginia is a pretty good football team when they aren't killing themselves with self-inflicted mistakes. You look at this team right now; they're 2-2. You could make an argument that they could be 4-0, and you could make an argument that they could be 1-3. That's kind of where this team is at. I mean, I guess if you look at it that way, it's kind of evened itself out in a sense, but there's potential here. I think what we took away from that Oklahoma game, or really we should have, and even the early part of Virginia Tech where they kind of took the air out, is when this team's hitting on all cylinders, they can hang with anybody. And West Virginia has 8 games left, and they could win all those games and they could lose a lot of those games. It's really still up in the air and depends on how it comes together. But I want to see how West Virginia responds, especially at home. I think you took a lot away from that Oklahoma game, but it doesn't really matter if you come out and lay another egg at home against Texas Tech.
Yeah, it's definitely a big one to kind of see where West Virginia is at. I feel like we say that about every game about, oh, the Maryland game will show you kind of how the season goes. And then LIU, you didn't really learn a whole lot, but then Virginia Tech was like, okay, this is the show me game. And then they played really damn well against Oklahoma. And you still really don't know what you've got there. I think the picture is coming to light a little bit. But it's just weird thinking, we're almost halfway through the season and we don't really, it's a crapshoot what to expect from this West Virginia team every year or every game. But hey, that's what makes college football exciting, right?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the thing that makes it so hard is you don't know which offense is going to show up. Is it going to be the West Virginia offense in the first half against Virginia Tech? Is it going to be the one in the second half? Is it going to be that offense on that first drive against Oklahoma? Is it going to be the one on the in the second half? I mean, it's just hard. It's really hard to put your finger on it right now, and I think they're still figuring it out too. I mean, they're obviously still tinkering around with the 2-quarterback scheme, and how they're going to do that, how they're going to mix it in, and I think that that's going to continue to evolve, as I said. But speaking of quarterbacks, Texas Tech has a familiar name, a guy we didn't really expect to see, but here he is again, Henry Colombi. We all remember him last year. He actually filled in last year as a backup and led Texas Tech to a win over West Virginia. Didn't have great numbers, but what he did well was move around in the pocket. He threw the ball well. He extended plays. That's going to be an issue for West Virginia. They're going to have to be ready for that. What do you think? What do you think about him, Jared? Do you think that Colombi can lead the old Red Raiders in and have some success?
It's entirely possible. I mean, I've pulled up the numbers from last year: 169 yards passing, 40 yards rushing. Again, we've seen time and time again this year, West Virginia kind of hit or miss. Again, you don't really know what they're going to do when they're faced with a quarterback who can do both things. Um, so who knows? I mean, he definitely the sample size is small, but he definitely looked pretty sharp last season. Uh, so really, who knows? I mean, he's a Matt Wells guy. If I recall correctly, he was at Utah State with head coach Matt Wells. Uh, so there's probably not a better person on that team who knows the system. So that alone should scare you, especially when he's at the quarterback position. But who knows? I mean, I don't expect him to have a bad game. Something that I just kind of get caught up on is the fact that Texas Tech hasn't won a true road game since they last came to Morgantown 2 years ago. Road games are yeah, right. Road games are always a challenge, especially at Milan Puskar Stadium. I guess the Red Raiders should just be lucky that it's not a night game.
Yeah, hey, West Virginia's got a 7-game streak going too at home, so a lot on the line here.
Yeah, definitely a lot on the line. Well, I guess we might as well just get into it then. How do you see this weekend playing out?
Well, I think that before I get into our prediction, I do want to say when you look at Texas Tech, obviously I was, talking about their quarterback, but really their skill position guys are make it go. They got some great wide receivers as they usually do. Some skilled running backs. West Virginia's had a lot of trouble with their offense the last couple years. I think their defense, to their credit, is a lot better than they showed last week. I think they ran into a buzzsaw at Texas, kind of similar to what West Virginia ran into in Ames a year ago. No matter what Texas did, it worked. They kind of had success all day. So I do think that this is going to be a challenge for West Virginia. They're favored in this game. I think that's accurate. I'd probably say that's accurate even if their starter was playing, but with a backup, definitely. I think West Virginia is going to win this game. It's going to be closer than you want it to be for a period. I think they'll pull away in the fourth quarter. I'm thinking something like, 31-17, 31-24, something like that. I think that 34-24, something in that range. I think that West Virginia is going to end up winning this game. I don't see them scoring 70 points. I don't think that this is going to be a track meet by any means, but I think both teams are going to put some points up.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I feel like we do agree with each other every week. West Virginia is favored, as you mentioned. I think West Virginia is gonna have a good one. I'll be optimistic here and say that they just keep building after Virginia Tech, after Oklahoma. I honestly could see 27-21, same score of the Virginia Tech game. I could see that as in the realm of possibility. I think it'll really just come down to how West Virginia handles Columbia. As we just talked about, he was solid last year. He was really solid, and if you can neutralize him, I think you will have no problem taking on this Red Raider team. But if you can't, that's a big challenge, especially with how West Virginia has handled that type of player on offense this year. Keenan, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, ready for some more football. We're deep into the season now, ready to go. Once again, if you want to look at our stuff over on WVSports.com, we got plenty of content. We got some stuff from the Red Raider side as well. So look forward to it, and I hope to see you over there.
Yeah, West Virginia, Texas Tech, scheduled to kick off at 3:30 Eastern time this Saturday from Milan Puskar Stadium. Broadcast on ESPN2. It's Stripe the Stadium, and it's the day that WV retires Darryl Talley's number 90. Safe to say it's going to look like a good fun day. As always, Keenan and I will have game day coverage on Twitter and online at WVSports.com. And as always, don't forget to join the conversation before, during, and after the game on the Blue Line. For Keenan, I'm Jared Sari. Thanks for listening to Musings from the Mountains, and we'll be back to talk again soon.